Howdy, how you going? I thought it was time to take a look back at the worst of Cartoon Network. It's essentially the video that got me started, actually. I was very, very, very blessed to get a lot of people that really liked this video, and a lot of people that really hated it, but, generally more people that liked it, which was great. Really clicked a button with a lot of people. It really connected with a lot of people, which is wonderful. Yeah, and I basically talk about Cartoon Network and some of the worst of it and the worst of it. And I love this song I used, done by Prototype Raptor. I always use a lot of his work. Open Your Heart, which obviously a lot of you probably know us from Sonic Adventure 1. And it was such a good remix. Anyway, number 10. What was number 10 again? Ah, yes, Uncle Grandpa. Which I feel a little bad about nowadays because it did get a lot better. Not a lot, a reasonable amount better in Season 3. Much more coherent, but at this point it was all over the place and very hard to get a feel for. I didn't much care for the colors. I didn't much care for just that it was so completely incoherent and unstructured and cognitively just incomprehensible. It felt lazy at the start. It was a bit weird as well. I didn't like the design of a bit weird. I didn't like the design of Uncle Grandpa as well. He was very poor design. His tiger kind of being live action didn't meld and blend in very well. And this guy's done a lot of work before. He does Secret Mountains Fort Awesome before this, and one other one, and all three failed. And that's a crazy thing, and I imagine he brings creative stuff to the table, though, because there is so much worse than Uncle Grandpa out there, because this isn't corporate junk. And by the way, apparently Steven Universe, Rebecca Sugar, and the creator of Uncle Grandpa are actually good friends, so that's part of why they did a crossover. And I think that, looking back, I said this, the crossover was bad, but looking back, it was okay. It was okay, the crossover. I think they managed to meld these two very different cartoons surprisingly well, and it was a very just random, very kind of different episode of Steven Universe that I think worked okay. I wonder if it brought any viewers to Uncle Grandpa. Anyway, I think though there is a lot worse stuff out there, and I think that is worth saying, because this isn't corporate shill. This is so random and weird and unstructured that it just is not understandable and doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think there's much worse than that out there. You know, we need more random stuff or more creative stuff like that, because that's how we get the BoJack Horsemans, maybe with a little bit more structure and idea of what they're doing. Supernoobs, I've simply never talked about again, because although it was really bad, it just, there isn't ever much talk about it. It was a bad Cartoon Network cartoon, and that was about the sum of it. Like, people don't talk about it much anymore because there wasn't much memorability to it. Like, it's one of those ones that does just disappear from your mind. It's like, wait, this was on this list, and I know I can barely remember it. Apparently, with a couple of people I spoke to, it clicked with them. But for the most part, most people seem to agree that there wasn't much appeal to this one. Again, I think there's worse things out there. Like, it was very boring and forgettable, but it wasn't like insultingly bad or that insultingly bad. They're very much worse stereotypes, though, which is worth saying. The animation wasn't that lazy, though, when I look back on it. It's sort of standard Johnny Test sort of animation, which is, not great, but it was okay. Yeah, not much to say on Supernoobs. Problem Solvers. A fair bit to say on this one, actually, because this is another one that came from a creative place. It was developed by one guy on his Apple computer, I think it was, through this very simple paint program. And I think if he hadn't made such a kind of... The Time Coaster episode particularly has such a bizarre sort of mixture of colors and seizure-inducing imagery that it didn't do them any favors. With your first episode, you want to bring something creative, but you want to also very much avoid certain triggers, because it's the first thing a lot of the critics are going to see. It's the first thing most people are going to see. It's going to be the thing that takes you off. You normally start at episode 1. So if you botch it up in episode 1, which they did, unfortunately, because the later episodes aren't as bad. I look back on them and I look at some of the later episodes, I'm like, these are okay. I actually think the concept is kind of neat, where they go around and say, we're going to solve problems, we're just a bunch of teenagers, and we're going to try and help people solving problems in our own little guild. And I think that's really cool, actually. I think this could be done so well. It could be such a neat concept. And it's a shame visually it was so appalling. He does really look like a fish man. Look back. Johnny Test, I've torn this apart a few times, and he's just a little smug little bleh. And there is a little bit of self-deprecation in it, which I appreciate, but it is still really stupid. Like, they'll stick ice up their nose and wait to see who gets a brain freeze first, and he's just fits all those sort of self-adulation, hippy-dippy sort of young person sort of stereotypes. And with a fiery hair, I mean, all he needs is a Justin Bieber haircut, and he's just about complete. And as a matter of fact, I think he does. He has that kind of bald spot around the side there. It's just, ugh. But it's had so many seasons. It has had so many episodes, and I've known a lot of people who have watched it and certainly haven't taken that much offense to it. It sort of just falls into that exists for a lot of my older friends generally, and some of my younger friends as well, sort of just say, it sort of exists, it's no big deal. But I just found, like, even when I was looking at the best episodes of bad cartoons, the best episode of the list was still bad. I was like, this is the best I can find. The sisters are okay. The sisters are okay. Johnny Test himself, though, and his farts and his power poofs, and it's just like, oh, come on, guys. Really? We can do smarter than that. So wasn't a fan of that one. Yeah. I don't know what else I'd add to that, actually. The later episodes did get much more self-deprecating, much more self-aware, and they became a bit more their own thing. And again, I don't think this concept is that... It's not creative. It's very much a rip-off of... It feels like a rip-off of Dexter's Lab, almost. So, yeah. I've talked about Johnny Test a few times, though, so I try not to just talk too much about it. Secret Mountains Fort Awesome. This one was a visually appalling one, as you can see. It was made by the same guy who made Uncle Grandpa. This was basically his first experiment. And obviously it didn't work out well, but again, it's disgusting, but it's creative. You have no idea where they're going to end up, and I try to give a little bit of flack nowadays to those cartoons that are basically a string of consciousness that are basically just looking at, this is a person's thoughts, this is where we're going to go, it's not going to have structure, it's going to be interesting. So yeah, it's another one, I wanted to talk about it, and it is, from a technical perspective, bad, and certainly viscerally unattractive. But I wouldn't call it, I find the formulaic stuff so much worse than this guy's work. That's why I don't really talk about it much nowadays. Those voices were quite bad, though. The purple guy's voice was okay. He was alright, and the butt guy... Oh, butt. It's so stupid. The butt guy had an okay voice, despite his unfortunate appearance and name and everything else. Even his arms are butts. Oh, God. Yeah, well, I wonder if this clicked with kids when it came out. I wonder if they were like, ooh, butts and farts, ooh, because I never heard much of a kid's opinion on this, or just their general thoughts on it, whether it was funny or not, or I don't know. I can see this appealing to some kids, but it didn't get another season, so obviously it didn't get too much leverage. Yeah, that wasn't... Yeah, it was... a fairly good, okay one from a creative perspective. And Kingsaki, I forgot I talked about this one again. Yeah. As I mentioned in worst cartoons, this one I'd probably wouldn't take it off the list. I don't think I'd take it off the list because it's still viscerally very unpleasant. It doesn't make sense, but it's an experiment. It's an experiment on from one creator, seeing like what he can do, what he can put together, and I feel like it's telling a story that I'm not fully picking up on. And there's so many sexual undertones, and it certainly does belong on Adult Swim. And I think it fits Adult Swim. That's the other thing. It fits the stuff we kind of expect to see from Adult Swim. Very experimental, kind of low budget stuff that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, but is like can be ultra violent, can be ultra weird, and clicks with some people when they're stoned or half drunk at 2 a.m. in the morning. Anyway, Teen Titans Go. I think it was actually one of the first face reveals I've ever done back there. What can I cover with Teen Titans Go? I feel like there's nothing I can say that hasn't already been said by critics so many times. I haven't actually talked about Teen Titans Go for a year now, I think about a year. And I certainly regret talking about it previous times, but funnily enough, you've got to talk about popular material sometimes. If I want to keep doing this for a living, I have to talk about popular stuff sometimes. You try and find that balance between talking about what is popular, but also talking about stuff that should be talked about and keeping it a passion. And finding that balance and still making a living off it is so tricky. I personally find on YouTube, some people can do it way better than me, and I try to just show humility about it. And I understand it gets a bugger sometimes that your favorite critics might continually talk about it, and I try not to do the clickbaity stuff nowadays. I know I do always try and put a face on my thumbnails and stuff, but I guess this is what comes out when I talk Teen Titans Go, just some of the criticism from a small minority. It's the first thing I think of nowadays, because even when I showed the sheet of Teen Titans Go on Worst Bugs Bunny, everyone was like, "You deserve to be attacked by," because I said Teen Titans Go. And like, there are other critics out there who still talk about it, and I'm just wondering, do they also get this flack? And I don't know, maybe I just don't cover enough for a new topic on it or something like that, or I don't cover new ground on it. But personally, I'm sick of Teen Titans Go as well. I don't really want to talk about it anymore. I'd much rather talk about... There are popular subjects which I don't think are like that. It's just like, we pretty much all know Teen Titans Go isn't like... at all like the original. It's an insult to the original, and I think it is given a pass by a lot of people because like they haven't necessarily seen the original, or they think, oh, it's just for kids. But I don't think saying it's just for kids is an acceptable argument, and this is the argument I've had with George. Not argument, but we've politely sort of talked about with Blame It on George. I chat with him on Skype sometimes, in that he says basically, well, it is just for kids, but I say, shouldn't we be giving kids smarter stuff than that challenges it? Just because kids like it doesn't necessarily make it good for them, or doesn't mean that's what they deserve. And we get stuff that kids do deserve nowadays, like Adventure Time and Steven Universe, Milo Murphy's Law, any of the Disney XD sort of cartoon lineup, like Star vs. the Forces of Evil, basically my Legend of Korra, Avatar. This is stuff that still appeals to kids, that still challenges them, still gives them real things to think about that they'll remember. So I don't think that argument that it's just for kids is ever suitable. And I think I've talked about that before a few times, but I think it's always well worth saying, because it's kind of the knee-jerk reaction I've heard some people go back to. And I like George. He's a great guy. I'll probably have him in a collab soon, because he's a very nice fellow, and I certainly understand where he comes from, and very informed as well. I think I'll chat about him. I'm thinking of doing a list where I basically talk about cartoon critics soon. Positive light, though, and not certain critics. And talking a bit about the cartoon community, and sort of saying what I like about certain... and trying to bring something positive to every cartoon critic. And I feel like it's not really my place to say these sort of things, but I felt that would be interesting because I'd love to get to know the cartoon critic community better, because I don't watch much of other people's stuff. And I'm completely off topic, I'm so sorry. I just thought that was kind of interesting. And 12 Ounce Mouse. Basically, with 12 Ounce Mouse, it very much is, once again, a case of they've put absolutely no effort into the animation. I think this was made in Microsoft Paint from when I was looking at background research of it. I think the most creative part is basically like the cardboard things at the start or the end, I think, in the credits, where they're like blowing up the with fire the cardboard buildings and stuff. But even the jokes, it very much feels all the way through like these people were stoned or under the influence of, some sort of drugs, and it certainly doesn't work. And maybe that was what they were going for. They were trying to say to the Adult Swim audience, which may particularly often be under the influence of alcohol and drugs, I hope not, but might be, and maybe for them this was just freaking gold. But even then, it doesn't have that many colors, and you just wonder, maybe to really slow mentally people in that kind of slowed state, it's interesting, or it's really comic gold or hilarious. But you can watch Fantasia for that. You've got tons of other, actually kind of good stuff on both levels that would work. But I guess if this was what was on, obviously it was a low budget experiment and didn't cost Cartoon Network or Adult Swim or rather that much to do. But it's just been absolutely destroyed by critics over the years, and rightfully so. I didn't talk about Squidbillies on this list, and in retrospect, I feel like I probably should have, because that was so bad. I'd actually consider it probably worse than 12 Ounce Mouse. 12 Ounce Mouse wasn't as insultingly bad to me as Squidbillies, so I've been tempted before to talk about that. God, that was bizarre. That was from the cartoon there. What do you call Anyway, let's jump on to Annoying Orange. Oh my god. I really, 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 really hate this cartoon, and I hate Annoying Orange. I hate how obnoxious and annoying, unpleasant it is. It is just leering at the camera. It is just, to me, the worst of YouTube in a nutshell, and the fact that it would get attention by Cartoon Network just says so much, and I'm so glad it mostly bombed. A bit like Fred, both Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon got the most annoying personalities they could find on the YouTube because they get lots of clicks, and they tried to give them a cartoon or a show, and I just think, I really hope it failed for them. And with all the good people we have who are still popular on YouTube, all the interesting people we have on YouTube who are still popular, to give it to these people who are mugging them I don't even think it looks that cheap. It looks like they put a decent budget into this. And I've never liked the look of the faces. They look unattractive. And to be fair, that's the actor who I think does it. And he's an okay actor in those parts live action, but he looks so unpleasant with the eyes on top. Oh, I hate that laugh. I can never tear apart this cartoon enough because I just... No, not cartoon. It's like a show. It's why I don't talk about it much, because it's a show. It's a live-action abomination of kind of cartoon CG, kind of show. And just whenever I see that face, I just feel annoyed. It is, oh my god. It is just a visceral unattractiveness that really appeals, I guess, to the under 7 demographic? I don't know. I guess because if you want a little psychology background, the fusiform cortex lights up when we see a face, which is like a special part so we can instantly see faces in a crowd. It's part of why a lot of people will use faces, big shots of faces, in thumbnails and videos and YouTube, because, well, they may not necessarily know it, but that's part of why it happens, because that part of our brain lights up, which we focus our attention on. And I guess that's why they have all these faces on the fruit and stuff, and it's something that's instantly recognizable. And I guess that just works for them, and being obnoxious and squealing works for the 6-year-olds because it's memorable. And it apparently works for a Cartoon Network series as well, and makes me lose faith in humanity every time I see it. it's just rotten. It's just really, really, really rotten part of, it makes me feel bad when I see this sort of stuff getting attention. And you've got to take the, oh my god, that is just horrendous to look at. Ugh. Apparently Weird Al got a cameo in this, and I feel worse. I love Weird Al, and the fact that someone told me he actually had a cameo in this, I'm like, why would you agree to this, Al? I mean, not all the stuff you've been in has been amazing, but like, oh yeah, he's such a respectable man to me, and like, and the fact that he would go in this, like, he's one of my idols, and the fact that he would go in this, it just, maybe he didn't know what he was signing up for. Maybe he was just doing a guest voice and didn't realize he was doing annoying orange. I don't know, but yes, I'm not a fan of annoying orange, obviously, but yeah, I think overall though, like, despite the shortcomings we have seen, the good stuff we get from Cartoon Network is so memorable, and is just really does, even though it may not be their biggest money makers, the fact that they still do try and get this stuff that is smart and clever and changing the way of culture, like being very culturally relevant, rather, you know, you've got to appreciate that about it. So yeah, thanks very much for listening, guys. It was nice to finally go through this list and talk about some of them again. I'll talk to you later.